So I just saw this article on Alternet about a change that the Bush administration is going to try to put into effect in regards to our Environmental Protection Act. Um, they're changing the language, redefining some legal terms, and the Endangered Species Act is basically going to be made completely ineffectual. And this article is on Alternet. I posted the link. It's by the linguist and cognitive scientist George Lakoff and Chris Schutz, who I think is a reporter or blogger for Alternet and some other sites. I'm gonna read it, and yeah, the Endangered Species Act is our primary legal tool for environmental protection. We have until September 15th, about a week, to save the Endangered Species Act. Actually, we have 3 days. Um, not just some species, but the act itself. In other words, we have 3 days to save the Endangered Species Act. The Bush administration officials are proposing redefinitions of terms that would allow conservative appointees in federal agencies to virtually destroy the act. Their goal is to allow proposed projects to proceed, even if such projects would kill off endangered species or place them or their habitats in jeopardy. If the changes are not effectively changed by September 15th, they will go into effect and goodbye species. Act now. Go to the end of this article for instructions. We need the public to flood the agencies involved with comments opposing the redefinitions and rule changes. While our attention has been turned elsewhere, the Endangered Species Act, our major environmental protection legislation, is being gutted. Now. Not by Congress, not by the courts, not even by Bush's executive orders. It is being destroyed by redefinition, by a series of linguistic tricks. Causation within an ecological system is almost always systemic in nature. That is, there are disparate contributing causes with disparate contributed effects in various places at different times. Direct causation is rare. Direct causation occurs when there is a single act at a given time and place that results in a single effect at that time and place. For example, a species of frog limited to a local wetland could be completely wiped out by a condo development with that wetland filled in. Direct causation. But frogs around the country are dying out due to a complex combination of factors in different places at different times. Systemic causation, in other words. Progressives and conservatives tend to think differently about causation. Conservatives, who think in terms of individual, not social responsibility, tend to think in terms of direct causation, what an individual does. Progressives, who think in terms of social as well as individual responsibility, tend to think in terms of systemic causation. For example, if you ask what the causes of unemployment are, conservatives will tend to say people who aren't willing to do hard work or willing to get the skills they need. Progressives will talk first about social causes: lack of education, lack of opportunities to acquire needed skills, corporate greed or insensitivity, and so on. The present Endangered Species Act is realistic about systemic causation. Disparate causes that contribute to disparate future effects count as causation. But imagine what would happen if causation were redefined to mean only direct causation. Developmental projects now forbidden because they contribute significantly to future disparate loss of species and species habitat would now be allowed. Lots and lots of disparate projects at disparate places and times would be allowed. Their collective systemic effects could wipe out a great many habitats and species. This is exactly what is being proposed by the Department of the Interior and Commerce, as published in the Federal Register, Volume 73, Number 159, Friday, August 15th, 2008. They want to redefine causation so that only direct causation, they call it an essential cause, counts as causation that jeopardizes the existence of a species listed under the Endangered Species Act or jeopardizes that species' critical habitat. Species. The effect is that proposed development projects can contribute significantly to the destruction of habitat and the extinction of species, provided that they do not directly cause the elimination of a species or directly reduce the population of a species or extent of its habitat, something that rarely happens. The result is that almost all proposed developments that were previously understood as causes of habitat destruction or species extinction will no longer be seen as causes at all and will be permitted. The reason will be that cause itself will have been redefined. Up until now, the Endangered Species Act was governed by certain rules. The rules involved are the following. First, a federal action agency, for example, the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which proposes a project. So an action agency, a federal action agency, proposes a project. An example of such a project might be the granting of a license to operate a hydroelectric power plant. Second, a service, either the Fish and Wildlife Service for inland species or the National Marine Fisheries Service for marine species, whose job is the protection of plants, fish, and wildlife, and the gathering of information relevant to that protection. A consultation, a well-defined process in which an agency consults a service about a proposed project if it may affect species listed under the Act as threatened or endangered, in order to gather relevant information for the protection of those species. So I'm going to stop there, and you can read the rest of this yourself. But I want to tell you how to respond and contact these agencies. Actually, go to www.regulations.gov and use the search terms 50 CFR Part 402 Proposed Rule. The proposed changes are in document number EB 18938. If you want to see the proposed changes, click on View this document. And you can send a comment by clicking on the link Send a Comment or Submission. Plain emails will not be considered. You have to submit your comment through this route, and I'll post these instructions. And remember, this will go into effect, the changes in the rewriting of these rules that I was describing about having a federal action agency, a service, a consultation, all of these steps to make sure that we're considering the true extent of the effect that a particular project might have on the ecosystem will be redefined and essentially made impotent to protect the ecosystem, which to a large extent is not something that can be understood in terms of direct causation. We should already be very concerned about the amount of species that are currently going extinct every year. It's already close to 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000. It's a rough estimate, but somewhere in that range. There's that many more times the level of extinction right now on the planet due to human activity than there would be in the absence of the human species. So our industrial activity, our use of resources, our degradation of certain ecosystems is destroying somewhere around 20,000 species a year. That averages to about 150 a day, if I'm not mistaken. So we're already wiping out species at an alarming rate. And this matters not just because, polar bears are pretty looking, but because loss of biodiversity leads to the collapse of ecosystems, and the collapse of ecosystems means that we don't eat. We also go extinct because the ecosystem is a series of connections that are not linear, they're not linked in this directly causal way. They're linked at a distance. There's certain effects that one species has on another that you can't immediately distinguish, but once the biodiversity lowers to a certain extent, then there's this collapse which occurs on a massive scale, because when you take away enough of the foundation of a building, you're not going to notice the building swaying until you take out that last piece that was holding the whole thing up, and then it just crumbles. And we may be on the verge of that, or at least moving towards that within 10 to 15 years at our current pace. So lessening our environmental regulation is not the direction we need to be going in.